Hello and welcome back to my channel, World War II Books Where to Start. I am Marshal Georgy Zukov, and I'm talking to you live from the Berlin front, just a few miles outside the capital. We're getting ready to assault it now. But first, I'd like to cover the top 5 books I read this year, and perhaps you'll like some of them too. So, I read about 65 books this year, really overachieving. Not everything World War II, not everything in history, but of those that were World War II, I'm going to give you my 5 favorites from the year. And starting off with number 5 would be Pearl Harbor, Verdict of History by Gordon Prang, Catherine Dillon, and Donald Goldstein. Published in '91. Now Gordon Prang is the Dean of Pearl Harbor Historians. He actually passed away in 1980. But there were a number of revisionist Pearl Harbor accounts put out in the 80s that Catherine Dillon and Donald Goldstein felt they had to reply to defend his legacy, because he is the Rosetta Stone of Pearl Harbor, shall we say. Anytime you go near Pearl Harbor, anything to do with it, Gordon Prang will be mentioned. And they were quite incensed by some of the revisionist stuff put out in the 80s, and they thought they had to do a detailed reply and rebuttal to it. And this is pretty detailed stuff. This is really deep and involved. They're going to take it from the perspective of all 10 investigations into Pearl Harbor that were done by Congress, Army, Navy, War Department, you name it, whoever did an investigation and put out a report. They'll walk you through all of those and combat the revisionist claims about conspiracy that allowed the Pearl Harbor attack to proceed, or who was in on it, supposedly, blah, blah, blah. So I read this first time probably 30 years ago, 20 years ago. I found it extremely dense. A lot of names, a lot of cross-referencing between investigations, a lot of nitpicky details about who's responsible for what area of defense in the Pearl Harbor scheme of things. Is the Army responsible for this? Is the Navy responsible for that? Who was the officer in charge, and what did he do, not do? What was his area of responsibility? So on and so forth. Rereading it now, 20 plus years later, I found it much easier going, but because, in the meantime, I've done a lot of other Pearl Harbor readings, so I'm more familiar with the territory. So if you run across this, it's probably not really beginner material for the Pearl Harbor drama, but you might want to buy it and put it back for a later date. I found it very good. It's they do mention John Toland's infamy as one of the revisionist claims they're combating, but they're really concerned with another guy who must have really slammed into Gordon Prang's reputation at some point. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but they really spent a lot of time derailing his claims. And this is kind of a completionist thing. If you're really becoming fascinated by Pearl Harbor, I think this would be on your list to tick off one last item for completionist's sake. But as a general intro thing, no, you stay away from this. But later on, yes, it's pretty good. Number 4 would be Retreat from Moscow by David Stahel, published in 2019. Stahel is kind of a newcomer to military history and World War II stuff. His area of concern is the first summer of the Russian invasion, from the initiation of Barbarossa until the final debacle in front of Moscow in December of '41. So he's going to take it from more of a command level between the various army groups, Panzer group commanders, divisional commanders, back and forth with Hitler's headquarters and Army Command headquarters, and all the soap opera drama about, I don't want to go here, I want to go there, I want to attack these guys, I don't want to attack those guys, I don't have enough tank strength to attack these guys, I'm missing infantry, my men are cold, my men are hungry, it's snowing, it's negative 30 degrees, I can't do it. All the stuff you need to cajole and whip the German commanders into line to make them do what Hitler wants them to do, and which they're actually not able to do because they've simply run out of strength. He's going to cover all that. And he is a bit of a rivet counter, so you get a lot of divisional strengths, map movements, changes of plan. We're moving over here, we're encircling that, we're not doing this. Different roadways assigned to various units. How many guns everybody had, anti-aircraft complements, that kind of stuff. So from rivet counting perspective, yeah, it's there. It's also really a picture of command struggle between Hitler trying to get his army commanders to do what he feels is the National Socialist way to get the invasion completed, take Moscow, plant the flag, and claim a victory for the year. They still have it in their minds that if we just take Moscow, it'll all be over. No matter how many prisoners we took during summer, they still won't quit fighting. But as long as we take Moscow, it's a win. So you get that really just lockjawed struggle to make it happen. And Stahel's pretty good. And he's there's one particular thing that stands out to me in my memory about this book is just the nitty-gritty detail that Hitler would descend into to try to be like a company-level commander at times instead of a big picture guy. He's arguing with his field marshal about how many machine guns are posted in a particular cemetery they're defending. And this is a day-long conversation back and forth between phones and teleprinters. Got to find out how many machine guns are here. They have a long debate about it. And when the field marshal finally gets back and says, I got 2, Hitler says, man, that's a big mistake. All right, we always put 4 machine guns in a cemetery. Everybody knows that. Why aren't you doing it? Yes, my Führer, I will see if that happens. It's kind of the ridiculous level of detail that Hitler would get into to try to prove his point. He was, the greatest military commander of all time, as the Großfoss, as the lower echelon officers kind of called him behind his back, the greatest Führer of all time. Which, in this context, is kind of funny to see him argue about machine guns in a cemetery. You might as well ask what the platoon sergeant ate for dinner that night if you're going to worry about that kind of stuff instead of, big picture. So that's Retreat from Moscow. Again, probably not a beginner book, but not exceedingly over the top as far as river counting. So I found it pretty accessible. Number 3 is a repeat of mine, Black May by Michael Gannon. I covered this extensively in another video about U-boats. Michael Gannon is going to talk about 1943, just that one particular month when the Germans lost 42 or 43 U-boats in the North Atlantic combating the Allied convoys. And this was Donus's big moment when he finally had what he thought was the proper number of U-boats to take on the Allies. His dream goal was 300 at the start of war. He only had about 29 or 35 ocean-going U-boats at the time, but his dream force was 300. And the idea was to have 100 on station in combat zones, 100 in transit to the combat zone, and 100 on the way home to refuel and rearm and go back out. He didn't achieve this until 43, and he thought, man, I finally got the forces I need and the men in place, and I could finally really take down the convoy system like I planned and dreamed of all my life. Doesn't work out like that. After a fairly good March and April against the Allies, May, the Allies turned the tables and really socked to them. For minimal return, they lost about as many U-boats as ships they sank that month. It was pretty awful, and it kind of forced Donis to finally say, you know what, I got to retreat from the North Atlantic convoy runs for a while. I have to withdraw my forces and lick my wounds. The morale sinks to rock bottom. We're having no effect on the war, and we're getting our brains bashed in. So that's the meat. That's the heart of the book. It's really focused on convoy battles and individual commanders and every boat that gets sunk and how it happened. So as I said in that other review, there are 2 unfortunate chapters that drag the pace of the book down to a crawl that could have been disposed with. Aside from that, it's really solid. Black May by Michael Gannon. Number 2, a novel, Fatherland by Robert Harris. Published back in '91. This might have been his first novel, I'm not sure, but it's certainly an early one. I covered another one of his novels recently, V2. But Fatherland is going to be an alternate history of Nazi Germany if they had won the war. What the world might have looked at like in the 50s if Hitler had prevailed. And with this alternative history, we get a detective novel wrapped inside it with a kind of a film noir, hard-boiled detective thing going on. So we get a body showing up where, hey, no one should be murdered here, and we have innocent bystanders or witnesses not so innocent. And it kind of scales up into a big political issue. Who's covering up what? Who got away with the loot? Where is the loot? Who's to blame? And how it all connects the dots to all of the string pullers within the victorious Third Reich as they hold sway over a decimated Europe with all the other Western European nations licking their boots, and we have a disbanded Soviet Union kind of dissolved into guerrilla-style combat, reminiscent of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, or U.S. involvement in Afghanistan in this century, as the Americans are feeding them bullets and bombs and military advisors to try to keep the struggle going on the sidelines. Carried off very, very well. Harris really does a good job of building tension and immersing you in this 1950s style successful Nazi Germany fantasy kind of thing. He does it really well. I was really impressed with it. We have the proper ending, of course. We can't let them all have their own way, even in an alternative fiction kind of thing, to preserve the idea of the good guys will win after all. But very convincing novel. I was really impressed by it. Fatherland by Robert Harris. And number one, my favorite book of the year. Very pro stuff here. I don't really think there is probably an easy intro to this topic, and that's the economics of the Third Reich. It's probably all going to be heavy-hitting stuff. And I tried a book a while ago called Hitler's Empire by Mark Mazauer on the same topic, and Dick maybe got halfway through it because he kind of derailed himself into actually trying to be a military historian and going on about the War of Annihilation on the Eastern Front. And I had to stop because you just dealt away with the premise of your book and went totally different direction. But this one that I read this year was fantastic. It's Adam Tooze's Wages of Destruction, published in 2006. The first few chapters are really tremendously tough sledding. Unless you're an economics guru, you work in finance, you're a Wall Street guy, you're a crypto trading guy, something like that, this might be, it's bread and butter, it's a light snack, it's a cookie, it's no problem. For me, it was very, very tough to get going and make it through the early chapters. Once we get into 35, 36, 37, and spinning up towards the war, and the rearmament program is really taking hold, then the book takes off for me, and it's smooth sailing. I'm into familiar territory with the names and the policies being carried out. But until then, it's a tough go. But I think it's very rewarding once you do get there to the familiar territory. And once the war starts, we're also going to get Speer and Sauckel involved, and the 4-year plan with Goering and his industrial empire. And late in the war, we get Heinrich Himmler's SS and their economic empire as they try to take over everything that Speer and Goering had built up, but in a National Socialist way to kind of cement the political side of it as the war is going against Germany. Himmler kind of steps up his bid to take control of the Third Reich from the inside, shall we say. And it just really tells you how they kept the economy kind of dancing in midair, despite the fact they're all alone in Europe and they don't really have any economic trading partners. They're embargoed. They can't ship anything out. And they're surviving on the spoils of war they took from conquered territories, trying to amalgamate industrial plant and other subdued countries into their economic system, while having virtually no consumer goods to sell to anyone because everything has to be dedicated to the war effort. They're fighting the world's 3 largest economies all at once. They're taking on the U.S., Britain, and the Soviet Union. And Germany has like the 4th or 5th rated worldwide economy at the time, with not nearly the industrial plant that any of the other combatant nations has, let alone taking all 3 at once. So to keep that effort going is a fantastic strain. And you can clearly see how they in a war of production, where numbers matter, how many bullets, bombs, tanks, guns, planes do you have besides the men to operate them, how they really stood no chance against these powers as a conglomerate, and probably couldn't have defeated anybody but maybe Great Britain all by themselves. But even that was obviously problematic because of geography and Britain being an island nation and Germany not being very good at amphibious warfare. No matter what their economy was, militarily they were up against a rock and a hard place with that situation. So Adam Tooze will cover all that from the economic perspective, and really kind of it's kind of rounding out your education kind of routine for military, political, historical, not historical, but geographical and the Holocaust. This is kind of an all-in-one amalgamation of, because he's going everything relates to economics. Even the destruction of the Jews relates to economics, at least in the Nazi mindset, and what they plan to get out of it economically from the genocide. So this is really expert level material, and it probably doesn't appeal to everybody. It's probably not a broad mass market kind of appeal to readers of World War II history. It's kind of a specialist kind of stuff. But if you have a knack for it, if you're kind of intrigued by how they kept the economic engine going, Wages of Destruction as your starting point and your stopping point. It's a number one fantastic. So that's my top 5 books I read this year in World War II history. Once again, we got Pearl Harbor: Verdict of History by Gordon Prang at number 5. We have Retreat from Moscow by David Stahl at number 4. Black Bay by Michael Gannett at number 3. And Fatherland, a novel by Robert Harris at number 2. And Wages of Destruction by Adam Tooze at number 1. Thanks for watching. Think about subscribing. Drop a comment or something, and I'll get back to you another time with another vid. Until next time, happy reading.